Hey, this is Anna Voss, and you're listening to the Your Morning Coffee podcast with my friends Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart. Weekly music news for the new music business.
From music business worldwide, Spotify cruises past $250 million subscribers as it eyes $1.5 billion annual operating profit in 2024.
From Spotify, all you need to know about artificial streaming.
And from Billboard, weighing the pros and cons of the current DIY distribution system. Boy, we have got an action-packed show, Jay. You were just back from Colorado, and
yes, sir.
Your arms are tired. We're going to talk about lots and lots of things. So we're glad you're here, and we're going to start the show right about now.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand!
Your morning coffee is on the air. 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 Standing by. Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Winds are blowing from the east, carrying the desert heat through the eucalyptus leaves. An August day in early June, a shade of green returns again, in treason in my innocence, a certain warmth upon my skin feels forever 22. And somewhere in that summer haze I'm picking up a trace of you. A little taste of you.
Great song. That is Anna Voss. She, both an intro and audio. The song is Trace of You. That album won't be out until March 21st, actually.
Right.
She just released the song you're listening to called Trace of You, which is a lovely song.
It is really nice. I got to see Anna Voss open for Sixpence None the Richer in Nashville recently. She actually joined the band on stage. She had co-written a song with Lee Nash from Sixpence. Wonderful show. And I really loved Anna Voss. She opened with Tears for Fears, Everybody Wants to Rule the World. And it was really beautiful, her rendition of it. So yeah, super cool.
So Jay, you were busy this last week. You were over at Colorado State University doing a guest lecture in lovely Fort Collins, Colorado. That must have been a good time.
Yeah, lovely is right. What a beautiful, beautiful city there in Colorado. This is my fourth year of guest lectures with Colorado State University with Chuck Morris and Eric Griffin. You know, that music business program there is spectacular, and I always have such a great time, and those students are so good. So thank you, Chuck and Eric, for having me out there. I was listening to this podcast on the trip out, and it's one of my favorite podcasts ever. I know we've talked about this before, but the podcast is Bubble Trouble with Will Page and Richard Kramer. And I never miss an episode. And typically after I listen to an episode, I email them and tell them how much I loved it. Anyway, this last one is probably my favorite one that they've ever done. And it was an interview with our friend Mark Mulligan from Media, and I highly recommend it for anybody who follows this podcast. You've heard Mark Mulligan on this podcast, and Tatiana Cirasano, and those really smart people over at Media. But this interview is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's neat. It's kind of like the like two different teams kind of interviewing each other, or different baseball teams or something. It's and like you said, we like all of those people, and all of those people are super, super smart.
Yes, absolutely.
I am in awe every time I get a chat with them.
Yeah.
Hey, you've got a new Behind the Setlist podcast with the Gin Blossoms coming up this week. It's actually dropped, I believe.
Yes.
And what a cool band, cool guys. I've actually opened up for them, and they were playing in clubs in LA the same time that I was doing that back in the when was that, late 80s, I guess. And you mentioned what has kept the Gin Blossoms going for nearly 4 decades. Democracy. What a concept in a band.
Yeah, it really has kept them together, and I've been a big fan of these guys for a long time. I got to sort of see early Gin Blossoms. I worked at Tower Records with their bass player Bill Lean, and he worked at Tower Portland, where I worked. He worked at Tower Tempe in Arizona, where the band is from. But I've always loved Gin Blossoms, and we had a really great chat with them. So check out that Gin Blossoms Behind the Setlist podcast with Glenn Peoples and myself. Really fun episode this week. Couple of things before we jump into stories. There were a couple of articles this week about artificial intelligence, shocker. But one that, actually a couple of them that really grabbed my attention, and I know they grabbed yours too. They talked about Jerry Garcia from the Grateful Dead and Elvis Presley, what they're doing with their voices via AI. And so let's start with Jerry Garcia. There was a headline from Rolling Stone by David Brown. The article was, Jerry Garcia can read to you via new AI tool. It may just be the beginning. So next year marks the 30th anniversary of Jerry Garcia's death, sadly. But a new AI initiative, as well as programs it could spawn, they aim to keep the Grateful Dead leader's presence alive.
Amazing. So this summer, 11 Labs, a 2-year-old software company known for its advanced lifelike voice AI tools, announced a free app that allows fans of Judy Garland, Maya Angelou, Burt Reynolds, James Dean, and Sir Laurence Olivier to listen to AI recreated versions of their voices, read books, articles, poems, and other content. As of this week, Garcia became the newest and first music-connected member of what the company calls its Iconic Voices program.
Yeah, super interesting. The next one we heard about was Elvis Presley, to bring Elvis Presley's musical journey to life. It's called Elvis Evolution, and they'll utilize archival material and cutting-edge technology, including generative artificial intelligence, holograms, projections, alongside live music performances from a house band and themed set design. So this is like a live show, and it comes from Layered Reality, a production company that fuses digital technology with live theater, and Academy Award-winning special effects company, The Mill. In 2023, the former secured the rights to the Elvis Presley estate and Authentic Brand Group to license the icon's image and likeness.
Wow. And this
Interesting
is
stuff.
Just the beginning.
Just the beginning.
And it's just, oh my God, it's crazy.
What do you think about this, Mike? I mean, does that bother you that they're kind of rising people from the dead to do this stuff, or is it interesting to you?
I've thought, well, it's both. I find it's a little disconcerting. That's probably the best word I can use, because it's like, oh my God, it is just disconcerting. That's probably the only thing I can say. I understand the technology. I understand the interest in it, but it is a little. It gives me the shivers. It's kind of weird, and like you said, I kind of want them to be. They are where they are now, but I don't want them to be still here. I want to fondly remember them, but not hear their voices still in this kind of manner. But I guess I'm a little old school when it comes to that.
Well, one of the articles I read said it was ghoulish, and I thought that was ouch. But here's the thing. I totally understand all of that, but yet I'm so curious to see how they do it. And I'll just throw this at you. Can you imagine like your turn by turn or your voice coming from your phone if you could make that any of these fallen heroes?
Iconic artists,
I don't know. I think that's kind of cool, but I get why people think it's a little ghoulish anyway.
And I wonder I'd love to know the dollars and cents behind it, what they're paying these estates for that. But all this stuff will come out at some point, I'm sure. But it is truly fascinating on top of being ghoulish and somewhat disconcerting. Good piece by our friend Glenn Peoples in the Ledger newsletter, which Billboard, of course, puts out. From VIP tickets to premium streaming plans, the music business is entering a new era of upselling. This year, Live Nation has seen a marked increase in revenue from VIP experiences. And the strategy is catching on in other areas of the business as well.
Right. Glenn goes on to write that at Live Nation amphitheaters, revenue from VIP clubs was up 19%. And VIP ticket premium revenue for major festivals was up more than 20% in the third quarter. Earlier this year, VIP premium offerings represented 9% of Live Nation's overall amphitheater business, but, quote, should be 30% to 35%, according to CEO Michael Rapino. He told investors this month.
That's exactly. Amphitheaters where Live Nation controls the food and beverage experiences have the potential to deliver more fan spending. Converting an area of grass into a VIP club provides 20 to 30% returns on investment, Rapino explained. At Northwell at Jones Beach Theater, for example, Live Nation took the 15,000-seat venue from no premium offerings to 3 premium tiers. Of the 40 U.S. amphitheaters in its portfolio, the company could Jonesify half of them, Rapino said during an investor call on Wednesday. That was November 13th.
Yeah, I love that line. Converting an area of grass into a VIP club provides 20 to 30% returns on investment. So Glenn goes on to write that diving headfirst into VIP pricing is sure to help Live Nation's bottom line. The company believes premium offerings can add $200 million in adjusted operating income every year, according to its investor presentation. This year, VIP net per fan spending will have grown at 20% annually since 2019, well ahead of overall net fan spending growth of 8% annually.
Wow. Well, it is coming, and it's already here. And I know you've been out with Kiss and a couple of other bands, and that it's big business for a lot of these acts for sure. So there you have it. From exclusive lounges to fan meet and greets with artists, the concert business has been better than other music industry segments at filtering customers according to their willingness to pay.
That's right.
That is true. That is so true.
Absolutely.
Well, Jay, before we get rolling on the stories, what do you say we jump out and thank our sponsors?
Yes, sir. Let's say a big thank you to our newest sponsor, Mechanical Licensing Collective. That's the MLC. The MLC is a nonprofit organization, and it's making a big difference for songwriters, music publishers, and other rights holders by transforming how they receive mechanical streaming royalties from services like Spotify and Apple Music in the United States. Every month, the MLC collects the streaming data and royalties from those platforms, matches the money to the creator who has earned it, and then pays them, or their publishers and admin partners, the royalties they're due. To date, the MLC has already distributed over $2.5 billion in total royalties and has nearly 50,000 members worldwide. If you're a songwriter, composer, or lyricist with music streaming, or a publisher or administrator, you need to become a member of the MLC to ensure you're not leaving any money on the table. Best of all, membership is completely free, and the MLC pays out 100% of the royalties it receives. Visit themlc.com to learn more.
Wow, they are doing God's work over there for sure. We are also sponsored by Soundtrack Music for Business. The good news is that 33% of consumers discover new music they hear played in businesses such as restaurants, retail, bars, hotels, etc. The bad news is that over 70% of the U.S. small and mid-sized businesses are misusing music, resulting in a loss to music creators, rights holders, and the music industry to the tune of over $1.3 billion per year in the U.S. alone.
Wow.
Soundtrack is the leading music streaming service for business, providing music to more than 80,000 businesses globally. If you want to learn more, you can jump over to soundtrack.app/artist-guide.
That's right. We're also sponsored by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform. It makes it super easy to build a stunning website and online store for your music in minutes. All the features you need, they're already built in, including dozens of fully customizable design templates, tools to sell your music and merch commission-free crowdfunding and fan subscription features, mailing list tools to grow your fan list, integrations with Bandcamp, SoundCloud, YouTube, Bands in Town, and much more, so you can easily add content from other online profiles. Live music support from their musician-friendly team 7 days a week. Website plans start at just $8.29 a month, and that includes hosting and your own free custom domain name. Your Morning Coffee podcast listeners can go to bandzoogle.com, try it for free for 30 days. Just use the promo code Morning Coffee, all one word, and you'll get 15% off your first year of any subscription. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code Morning Coffee.
And we are also sponsored by Hypebot. Since 2004, Hypebot has chronicled the new music industry and the trends and technologies that are changing how music is discovered, consumed, marketed, and monetized. It is edited daily by founder Bruce Houghton with help from Alana Bonilla. Hypebot and sister blog Music Think Tank are published by live music discovery and marketing platform Bands in Town.
Yes, sir. Bands in Town. Over 90 million live music fans trust Bands in Town to get personalized concert alerts, recommendations, and messages from their favorite artists. It's the #1 artist services platform, connecting over 590,000 artists with their superfans. Managers, labels, agencies, and artists across their own, they access their own dashboard across to manage their and promote their tour dates across all platforms. You know, I've read that like 1,000 times, and I just I'm going to take a sip of coffee.
No judgment here, man.
Okay.
No
All
judgment
right.
here.
All right.
Absolutely. And every week I get to hang out with the guy with the mohair suit, Jay
my
Gilbert.
gosh.
He's a music industry consultant. He's the curator of the weekly Your Morning Coffee newsletter and a former executive with Universal Music, Sony Music, and the Warner Music Groups.
I always wondered what a mohair suit was. You know, when Elton John had that and Benny and
That's
the Jets, like, what's a mohair suit? Anyway, I am so fortunate. I get to do this podcast every single week with my good friend Mike Etchart. He's a longtime host of Sound and Vision Radio, formerly of SST Records, Warner Music, Capitol EMI, and Universal Music Groups.
Well, and speaking of mohair suits, I just happened to see a clip on YouTube, an interview with Cher, and she's got a book out, and she mentioned that when she met Sonny, she was I think she was working at a coffee shop. 1962. She was 16, by the way. He was 27. And he walked in and he had a mohair suit on. And that's what caught her eyes. So perhaps we should both be wearing mohair suits. I'm just saying.
There you go.
Just saying. Well, let's jump into the stories.
Yes.
The first one is from our good friend Murray Stassen over at Music Business Worldwide. Spotify cruises past $250 million subscribers as it eyes $1.5 billion annual operating profit in 2024. Spotify is on course to achieve its first ever full year as a profitable company to the tune of about $1.5 billion.
What? Did you just say profitable?
I did. I know
That
weird
is
word.
amazing. And if you look at Your Morning Coffee this week, we put a really cool graphic right at the top, and it shows. The company this last week published its financial results and user numbers for the third quarter of 2024, and that ended September 30th, by the way. The headline stat from the music streaming giant, Spotify's global premium subscriber base grew to just over $250 million, that's 252 million paying users in Q3. That was up 12% year over year, and up by 6 million net subscribers on the 246 million subscribers that Spotify counted at the end of the prior quarter, Q2 of 2024.
So the company's 6 million net subscriber additions in Q3 were 1 million ahead of guidance, as they say. In 2024, year to date, to the end of September, Spotify has added over 16 million net paying subscribers. It finished 2023, by the way, with 236 million paying subscribers.
Yeah, that's incredible. Let's talk about their monthly active users. That's the MAUs that we talk about so much. Mm-hmm. Spotify's total global monthly active users grew 11% year over year to 64 million in Q3, and by 2%, which was 14 million, compared to the previous quarter when the platform counted 626 million MAUs. The company's 14 million MAU additions were in Q3 were also 1 million ahead of guidance, which they talk about, with the rest of the world and Latin America seeing the biggest growth in the quarter.
Right. So they talked about premium revenue. In terms of finances, Spotify reported that its premium subscriber growth translated into premium revenue of 3.516 billion euros. That's $3.861 billion, in case you're writing this down, in Q3, despite greater than anticipated headwinds from unfavorable currency movements. I love those phrases like that. Spotify's premium revenue was up 24% year over year at constant currency. In terms of subscriber performance geographically, Spotify reported growth across all regions with outperformance led by Europe at 38% and Latin America at 22%. Spotify saw 27% premium subscriber growth right here in North America. Not too bad.
That's super interesting. And I don't think about things like unfavorable currency movements. That's super interesting. Let's talk a little bit about ad-supported revenue. You know, there's two tiers with Spotify. You can use the premium tier, or you can use the free / ad-supported revenue or tier. Spotify's ad-supported revenue hit 472 million euros. And again, that's $518 million in Q3. That was up 7% year over year at constant currency. Spotify noted in its investor presentation that it saw ad revenue growth in a challenging brand environment and that its music advertising was driven by, quote, growth in impressions sold partially offset by softness in pricing.
All these funny euphemisms. They put in these
softness in pricing.
Softness in pricing. Let's talk about profitability. The company's gross margin finished at a little over 31% in Q3. Meanwhile, Spotify posted a quarterly operating income of nearly $500 million in the quarter. That puts Spotify's YTD, i.e. the first 3 quarters, operating profit in 2024 at 888 million euros. That's $975 million, and firmly on course for annual profit in the full year. That's right, annual profit in the full year. In fact, Spotify is now forecasting fiscal year operating profit in 2024 of 1.37 1.37 billion euros, and that is about $1.5 billion.
Right. Well, we'll just wrap this up by saying that the company projects its total premium subscriber base to hit 260 million in Q4. Amazing. In addition of approximately 8 million net new subscribers in the quarter, Spotify forecasts an operating income in Q4 of about 481 million euros, which is absolutely incredible. So lots of Spotify news this week. But there was one story in particular that I want to call out that sort of flew under the radar. And I know you saw this too. And it was from Music Business Worldwide from Tim Ingham. Great job, Tim. And the headline was Daniel Ek just cashed out $35.8 million in Spotify shares. But that's nothing compared to his co-founder who just cashed out, are you ready for this, over $383 million.
Oh my goodness, how cool would that be? So according to an SEC filing spotted by Music Business Worldwide, Daniel Ek sold 75,000 Spotify shares Friday, enabling him to cash out, that's right, $35.8 million. The move is the 5th time in the past 18 months that Ek has cashed in some of his Spotify stock.
Right. Across 5 transactions that he's made, Fridays included, Daniel Ek cashed out approximately $376 million in Spotify shares since last summer. The biggest single cash out of Spotify stock, though, hasn't come from Daniel Ek. It's come from his co-founder in Spotify, Martin Lawrenson.
Indeed. So a separate SEC filing spotted by Music Business Worldwide and registered this week confirms that Martin Lawrence's Rosello Company Limited sold 959,000 and change shares last Wednesday. That was November 13th. That sale created a whopping $383.75 million in proceeds for that limited company, Rosello.
Yeah, Rosello is a Cyprus-registered holding company owned by Almatea, a Luxembourg-based firm, see how complicated this gets, whose sole shareholder is Spotify co-founder and the firm's former chairman, Martin Lawrenson. Lawrenson previously cashed out $81 million in Spotify stock. That was June this year. That's over $450 million he's cashed out within the spaces of 5 months. Nice work when you can get it.
Oh, man. I am green with envy, Jay. I am green with envy. Well, let's jump into this next story. It's from Spotify. All you need to know about artificial streaming, something we have talked about quite a bit in the last few weeks. Artificial streaming is a problem across the music industry. But what exactly is it? How can you avoid it? And what is Spotify doing to tackle this issue? This is, again, from Spotify themselves.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is, what is it? An artificial stream is a stream that doesn't reflect genuine user listening intent, including any instance of attempting to manipulate streaming services like Spotify by using automated processes like bots or scripts. If left undetected, artificial streams dilute the royalty pool, shifting revenue from legitimate artists to bad actors. They also undermine the fair playing field that streaming represents.
Right, so they go on to talk about a growth story. Since the industry's financial low point in 2014, streaming growth has turned the music industry around. In 2023, streaming accounted for 2/3 of global recorded revenue, with Spotify accounting for roughly 1/3 of that.
Right, but they talk about bad actors. As streaming payouts have grown to billions of dollars every year, bad actors have started trying to manipulate streams for their own financial gain or to scam artists by promising increased stream counts in exchange for money. We see that all the time.
Right. So then they move over to detecting and removing. Spotify invests heavily in detecting, preventing, and removing the royalty impact of artificial streams. They say we also charge labels and distributors when flagrant artificial streaming is detected on their content.
Right. And you and I had a really great conversation at Music Tectonics with Morgan Hayduke from BeatDap. They are on the pulse of all of this fake streaming. Some of these services seem too good to be true, and we've all seen these on socials, and we're advertised all the time about these things. Marketing and promotional services may target you on socials and via email with the promise of streams or playlist placements on Spotify and other streaming platforms, often in return for a fee. They're scams, and they should be avoided.
Right. So they may claim to be able to get a song streamed, playlisted, or prioritized in Spotify's algorithmic recommendations. None of this is true. Many of these services use bots to stream a song on repeat, attempting to inflate the stream count.
Right. They go on to say that some services charge money to be considered for user playlists, but they don't guarantee placements. Be highly skeptical of these services as well. And the last one is the only way to grow your career on Spotify is by gaining legitimate fans who engage with your songs and invest in you as an artist. Amen.
Exactly. Then they talk about penalties and deterrence. Spotify strictly prohibits using any third-party service that promises streams or playlist placement in exchange for money. These services violate Spotify's terms and conditions of use and user guidelines.
Yeah, and they go on to say that we want to ensure that artificial streams have no benefit and don't create any second-order negative impact on legitimate streams. We're always updating our systems to enforce these policies as quickly and as thoroughly as possible. Spotify's policy is that when we detect any artificial streams, the following penalties are applied.
Right. So these are the penalties. Those streams do not earn royalties, number one. Number two is those streams do not count toward public stream numbers or charts. That's number two. And number three is those streams do not positively influence recommendation algorithms.
Right. Depending on the severity of the artificial streaming detective, additional penalties can include the following: removal of the song from Spotify playlists. That's number one. Number two, the distributor of the track, after being informed of the artificial streaming by Spotify, may issue warnings, charge a penalty fee, suspend the user's account, or remove the music completely from Spotify. And the last one, removal of the track from Spotify altogether in cases where the track appears to be primarily a vehicle to enable artificial streaming.
Right. So then they talk about artificial streaming in your data. Looking at your Spotify for Artist data can provide insights into whether artificial streaming is impacting your account. If you see anything abnormal, please inform your label or distributor and share details of any services you've hired to help promote your music. You can also notify Spotify directly about any suspicious playlists your music has been added to.
Right. They just mentioned that any services you've hired to help promote your music, it may not be nefarious. You may hire a publicist, you may hire a radio promotion person, and to try to stay relevant and to compete, sometimes they use services that use bots, spin farms, scripts, things like that. Abnormal activity may include the following: a sudden spike in streams for no apparent reason, followed by a drop-off. Number two, an unexplained spike in streams where a location where your tracks haven't previously been active.
Right. And then they also say the majority of streams coming from unexplained or surprising sources of streams, such as, in quotation marks, other, or another streaming source that doesn't make sense, and also a sudden and short-lived increase in follower growth.
Right. But then they have this sort of FAQ, and one of the things we just brought up, the question is, what if I hire a PR or marketing company to help promote my music? And they respond by saying, if you're looking to hire a third-party service to help legitimately market or promote your music, we strongly recommend researching the services and their methods of promotion to ensure that they're not engaging in artificial streaming. Ask questions about their methods of promotion and check out reviews from artists who have previously worked with them.
They go on to say some services charge money to be considered, in quotation marks, for their user playlists, but do not guarantee placements, which is strictly against Spotify's terms and conditions. Be highly skeptical of these services, as these services may deploy artificial streaming tactics. Talk to other artists who have used the service and search online for any reports from artists who hired these services and later were informed of artificial streaming.
So that begs the question, how do I know if a service I'm using is engaging in artificial streaming? And Spotify answers this by saying that if it feels like it's too good to be true, it probably is. Any service that guarantees streams, Spotify followers, or playlist placement in exchange for money is not legitimate and should be avoided. If you've hired this kind of service, you may notice abnormal activity within your Spotify data, such as sudden unexplained spike in streams from a location where your tracks haven't previously been active on, or an unexpected spike following an immediate drop. Or you may receive a warning or penalty fee from your distributor.
They go on to say these are all signals that the service you've hired is engaged in artificial streaming. If this happens, inform your label or distributor and share with them the name and details of the service you've hired. Your label or distributor will then be able to report the info to Spotify team and investigate the service further.
The question, does Spotify charge labels and distributors for artificial streaming, is answered by this. Spotify introduced a new deterrent to combat artificial streaming, effective this last April, charging labels and distributors per track when flagrant artificial streaming is detected on their content. This charge is only applied for very high rates of artificial streaming per track, by the way. We are able to fight artificial streaming once it's attempted on our platform, but the industry would be better off if bad actors were disincentivized from uploading content to Spotify and other streaming services in the first place.
So they say, we believe these charges will meaningfully deter labels and distributors from continuing to distribute the music of known bad actors that attempt to divert money from honest, hardworking artists, as well as deterring the bad actors themselves. These charges will support our continued efforts to keep the industry and platform free from artificial streaming activity.
Right. And the next question is, if I see streams in Spotify for artists, does that mean I'm generating royalties from them? In some cases, you may still see streaming spikes in your private Spotify for Artists data from artificial streaming, even though associated royalties have been withheld and public metrics, all-time track stream counts and monthly listener count, have been adjusted.
So in other cases, Spotify says we can detect and remove confirmed artificial streams before they reach your Spotify for Artists dashboard, which means you may be informed by your distributor of artificial streaming activity, even though the streams aren't visible in your Spotify for Artists. Either way, the royalty report from your label or distributor is the most accurate source of truth for understanding royalties generated from Spotify streams.
Right. Next, Spotify says, why do I see discrepancy in my Spotify for Artists data? And they answer that with, as part of these efforts to remove incentives for bad actors to engage in artificial streaming, we conduct daily cleaning to ensure artificial streams are removed from public numbers in the Spotify app. I've seen this in work, in progress. Public metrics in the Spotify app, an artist monthly listener count or a track's all-time stream count, are always adjusted to remove confirmed artificial streaming.
So the impact of artificial streaming on an artist's private Spotify for Artists data can vary. In some cases, Spotify can remove confirmed artificial streams from your data before your Spotify for Artists dashboard refreshes. In other cases, you may still see artificial stream spikes in your Spotify for Artists data, even though associated royalties may be withheld and public metrics adjusted.
Right. In these cases, during the time period where artificial streaming is occurring, there will also be discrepancy between the accurate all-time stream number and the rest of the song data, which still includes some confirmed artificial streaming. You may also see discrepancies between the accurate monthly listener count and the rest of the audience data. When there's a significant discrepancy, you'll see a message on your release page or audience page in Spotify for Artists that will notify you.
So the next thing in this FAQ says, what if I am placed on a playlist that's being artificially streamed against my will? They go on to say, we are aware that some services use bots to drive artificial streams of your music against your will or without your knowledge. We deeply understand how frustrating that can be. If you see anything abnormal in your Spotify for Artists data, please immediately share information with your distributor or label, who will work with our team to review and hopefully resolve as quickly as possible.
Right, that's a big problem. You know, while our data shows this small minority of total artificial streaming activity, Spotify is committed to tackling these services and ensuring that legitimate artists are not taken advantage of. You can actually reach out to Spotify directly at artists.spotify.com/c/playlist-reporter. You don't have to remember that. You can also just look in your Spotify for Artists or Google it and find it. And you can let them know about any suspicious playlists your music's been added to. They'll then investigate further to see if the playlist is engaged in artificial streaming before taking any appropriate action.
So their next FAQ says, why am I getting charged by my distributor for artificial streaming on Spotify? They go on to say, we share monthly reports with labels and distributors about confirmed artificial streaming on our platform. Based on those reports, your label or distributor may take actions like issuing warnings, applying a fee, or in flagrant or repeated cases, removing your content from streaming services or suspending your account. They say we charge labels and distributors per track when flagrant artificial streaming is detected on their content to incentivize them to better screen and educate their users, especially those with repeated violations.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and you and I talk about this quite a bit. One of the big ones is, does artificial streaming result in higher stream counts on Spotify? The answer, according to Spotify, is no. They say that we want to make sure artificial streams receive no benefit. So when we identify confirmed cases of artificial streaming or stream manipulation, we always adjust public streaming numbers and take measures to ensure the artist or song's popularity is accurately reflected in charts.
So they say, what is Spotify doing to deter big artists from artificial streaming? Artificial streaming is something we take seriously at every level. When we identify confirmed cases of artificial streaming or stream manipulation, we take actions that include the withholding of associated royalties, the correction of public streaming numbers, and measures to ensure the artist or song's popularity is accurately reflected in our charts. Additionally, based on the severity of the artificial streaming revenue, we may remove tracks from Spotify playlists. Spotify also charges labels and distributors per track when flagrant artificial streaming is detected on their content.
Yeah, and as we wind this down, they have a couple of really cool points near the end, because you'll see some of these fan clubs and these groups of fans that will stream something over and over and over again to sort of jack up the streams of their favorite artists. And so the question is it okay to encourage my fans to stream my music on loop? And Spotify answers that by saying that, fans inorganically streaming your music on loop or attempting to manipulate Spotify by using automated process, bots, spin farms, scripts, that behavior you should actively discourage. Of course, you should encourage your fans to listen to your music on Spotify, but you shouldn't encourage or support coordinated efforts from fans to stream your music inauthentically, right? Sharing supposed tactics around how to avoid detection, like streaming from certain playlists, making volume adjustments, or utilizing extra accounts with a Spotify premium plan, such as a family or duo account, to actively or exclusively stream a track. These tactics are broadly captured by our artificial streaming detection systems and can result in penalties. Your fans' energy is better spent supporting you in other ways.
Yeah, well, we saw a lot about that kind of in the K-pop world.
Yes,
a couple of years ago, for sure.
Yeah.
So if you want to learn more about how you can fight streaming fraud, you can visit the website of the Music Fights Fraud Alliance, which of course is musicfightsfraud.com. Their mission is a global task force aimed at eradicating streaming fraud. We represent for the first time all corners of the music industry, aligning as the united front to combat fraud in music streaming. Our mission is to ensure that the global music streaming market is fair and that all members actively contribute to solutions intended to balance the equity of its operations. As an alliance, our members hope to detect, prevent, mitigate, and enforce anti-fraud measures, thereby moving closer to an industry where fraud has no place.
Wow,
Very interesting.
We certainly need that. And I know that was quite a story, quite a piece, a lot to it, but it's super important and it's so topical right now. It's what everybody's talking about. So thank you for bearing with us with that. Our last story is from Kristen Robinson over at Billboard. And you'll remember a week or so ago, we talked a lot about her new Billboard, sort of new, her Billboard newsletter called Machine Learnings. She wrote this piece this week in Billboard and in that newsletter. The headline was Weighing the Pros and Cons of the Current DIY Distribution System. After Universal Music Group's $500 million copyright infringement lawsuit against Believe, which we talked about last week, Billboard explores what serious distributor reform would look like and if it's really a good idea. And again, this was part of Billboard's music technology newsletter, Machine Learnings, by Kristen Robinson.
Right. So they say last week we covered the news about Universal Music Group's filing a $500 million lawsuit against TuneCore and its parent company Believe over alleged copyright infringement of Universal Music Group's recordings. The lawsuit presented two core issues. First, that bad actors used TuneCore to upload songs to streaming services that were simply sped up or remixed versions of UMG copyrighted recordings, often listed under slight misspellings of the real artist or distributing altered versions like sped up or slowed down versions of UMG owned repertoire.
Right. So Kristen writes in her Billboard Machine Learnings newsletter, if you've been following the issues in the case over the last few years, this lawsuit feels like a long time coming. And the concerns that UMG raises are certainly not just TuneCore specific problems. They're industry-wide DIY distribution issues with the vast scale of songs being uploaded through these companies and staffs that are too small to catch every bad actor. Infringing material has, according to just about everybody, flooded onto streaming services.
So the distributors know it's a problem too. It's why TuneCore, DistroKid, CD Baby, Symphonic, Downtown, and more formed the Music Fights Fraud Coalition, which we were just talking about in 2023, and say they have increasingly invested in preventing fraud and infringement. Unfortunately, BeatDAP, the industry leader in identifying streaming fraud, believes the problem has only worsened since then. UMG is also not convinced that TuneCore is doing enough, saying that the company's business model incentivizes them to, as they say, turn a blind eye to this damaging activity.
Right. Here she's condensed some of the arguments she's heard among industry leaders, both for and against DIY distribution, continuing just as it is today. Kristen writes, I'll let you be the judge which outcome is better. So the first one, the argument number one, is why it's essential to protect DIY distribution as is.
Well, it's easy to take for granted today that anyone who wants to release a song can do it themselves, but that wasn't always the case. When physical records reigned supreme, record label contracts often favored the companies involved and seldom went the artist's way. At that time, artists were essentially forced to sign to a record deal if they wanted a chance at shelf space in stores, especially worldwide. This left artists vulnerable to unequal label deals that locked them in for many albums while the label took the lion's share of the royalties and the copyrights, often in perpetuity.
Right. Kristen continues that when DistroKid, CD Baby, TuneCore, and the like emerged in the 2000s, they let anyone sign up for distribution services to digital outlet like the iTunes Store for a flat fee and forever altered that power dynamic. Today, the playing field has leveled significantly. Hobbyists can get their music out into the world, and artists with professional aspirations can wait as long as they want before they have to give up a single percentage point of their master recordings to a label. These companies help shift negotiating power to the artists, and for the first time started the process of allowing music fans to decide which songs would pop, rather than the labels that pulled favors with the gatekeepers who worked in radio, retail, and the press.
So the shift also presented a new lucrative business opportunity. Music companies no longer need superstars in their catalogs to make their numbers. In fact, they don't need catalogs at all. A company can now make money by providing services like distribution to the masses of previously overlooked musical hopefuls instead, relying on volume to make up the numbers.
But that volume allowed for the proliferation of fraud, which is a problem that evolves every day, and bad people will always find loopholes. Already, most distributors have implemented common sense regulations and checks to curb fraud and invested money into quality control teams, but for many experts, it feels impossible to totally solve that problem. As it's commonly said, this is an endless game of whack-a-mole.
So here's argument number two, why the DIY distribution system is in need of serious reform. Well, currently over 120,000 songs are uploaded to streaming services every day, a rate that has rapidly increased for years and will likely continue to do so. This is mostly due to DIY distributors. While it's great that aspiring artists can get their music out there cheaply and easily, this has also led to rampant fraud and copyright infringement that puts excessive burdens on rights holders to police their own catalogs online. What happens when we inevitably get to a point where 1 million songs are uploaded every day?
Oh my God.
We can't keep going as we are now, and we are in need of serious reform.
Yes. Kristen goes on to write that while DIY distributors have announced initiatives like Music Fights Fraud that we just talked about, and they've hosted panels at industry conferences to explain the new methods they're using to stop bad actors, some people say that these companies have an incentive for at least some of it to slip by their watch. You know, given the business models rely on receiving fees in exchange for uploading as many songs as possible, self-policing is not enough, considering this problem only seems to be getting worse.
Yeah, so the introduction of generative AI has made this matter even more pressing. While it's impossible to know how much of the music being uploaded today is AI generated, and to date the streaming services have no regulations against this, it is certainly contributing to the rising number of songs released to streaming services per day. AI songs are believed to be exploited by bad actors to commit streaming fraud, as we saw in the September lawsuit, which alleged a musician named Mike Smith stole $10 million in streaming royalties by uploading AI-generated songs, using a distributor, and then using bots to stream them.
Yeah, we talked about that. It's hard to argue that it makes a user's streaming experience better when a platform has a vast number of AI songs and tracks that not a single person has streamed, not even once. It's clear that these songs, largely stemming from DIY distributors, are diluting the royalty pool at the expense of some stakeholders called quote-unquote professional artists. The negligibly, that's easy for you to say, low payments earned by hobbyists, who have accrued hundreds or just a few thousand streams, are sometimes lower than the fees one would occur from transferring the royalties into their bank account.
That's right. These distributors, the argument goes, should be penalized for the bad actors they let through. This has been proposed in many forms so far, including a financial penalty instituted by streaming services, requirements for significant know-your-customer checks to slow down uploads and verify users' identity, a minimum stream count threshold before artists can be eligible for royalty collection, a limit to the number of songs a user can upload at a time, an additional fee for storing massive uploads to streaming services, and more. It's not a viable business if you rely on a massive scale of song uploads but can't afford the proper staffers and tools to police them. Well, we will continue to have this discussion, Jay, and oh my goodness, it's just, listen, it's good that it's coming, that we're all talking about.
Right, exactly.
And it starts with that.
Yeah.
But it is such a gigantic, just in terms of all of just the parsing of data that has to be done to keep an eye on this. And when you're talking about that massive number of tracks being uploaded every day, every week, every month, it just makes your head spin.
Yeah, it's a big game of whack-a-mole, but as you said, at least we're addressing it as an industry. And through these stories that we covered today, we're really seeing that it's a lot more complex than you might think to identify and to take care of fraud. And, the landscape of distribution has changed so much. You and I could record something today and get it up right away on SoundCloud and YouTube. And then through a DIY distributor, we could have it up at every DSP globally. So the barrier to entry is so low now.
Yeah.
We're going to be watching this space very, very carefully. There's some really smart people working on these problems.
Yes, indeed. Well, as we wrap up the show, if you enjoy the show, we would certainly appreciate it if you tell one friend. And of course, big thanks to the MLC, Soundtrack, Bandzoogle, Hypebot, and Bands in Town, our wonderful sponsors that help us do the heavy lifting every week. We appreciate that. So on behalf of Jay Gilbert, my good friend, and myself, Mike Etchart, we both say thanks. And we'll be back next week on the Your Morning Coffee Podcast.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.